Welcome to Breaking Ice and Building Bridges from Possibilities. I'm Kelly Johnson.
And I'm Byron Jackson. Glad you're here.
Connecting a community through conversation.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Ice, Building Bridges. I'm your host, Santiago Ramones. I also have co-hosting with me,
Peaches.
And we have our awesome guest,
Hiawatha.
Thank you so much, Hiawatha, for being here with us. We want to talk to you about how you've been involved with Possibilities and how Possibilities has changed how we do community. So first of all, tell us about how you first got involved with Possibilities.
Well, let's see. Let's define possibilities. If I had a dictionary, does anyone know what a dictionary is today in the 21st century? It's a book, by the way.
Google, right? Come on.
It's got pages and words in it. But if you were to look the word up, possibilities or community, you would see possibilities there. I've worked with lots of venues, lots of organizations over my 71 trips around the sun. And this was one of those where it seems like it's always been dealing with people that live within their communities, people that come together to share their thoughts, their resources, their wishes, their hopes, their dreams, and see how others can connect to make them better. And I've always seen that with Possibilities. And I've been with Possibilities, I'd say, for at least 20, 25 years. Since they pretty much started, I would guess. I was working with Department of Mental Health and Behavioral Health. However, this just happened to be one of our partners, or I guess our associations. But the first time I came, I just said, this is amazing. How we do things, how you bring the folks together, how we share with each other, and it seems like it's never changed. And I think that's the greatest thing about it, that constant connection and that constant focus on community and the people, large or small, regardless of how many people we've had. It's always seems to be the same.
Yeah. What was it that you were doing and that Possibilities was doing at the time whenever you first got connected, and how did you get plugged into that?
Well, again, as I said, I had already retired from the military, so I'd spent 22 years in the Air Force. We moved here when I got assigned here to manage medical recruiting for the Air Force. But after I retired, we actually left here and we moved to England for 4 years. And while I was in England, I actually worked for the community there. I worked for the education systems there, the youth services in England, their parent teachers organizations, their Home Start organizations. And then we came back to Texas, and I maintained that same focus working in communities. So I've always been community minded. But when I got back to Oklahoma, I decided to work for a nonprofit, which again was substance abuse, community, behavioral health, drugs, prevention. And that was our connection with Possibilities. Even though it wasn't the advocacy aspect of it, it was more the community connection, the community resource finding, the capacity building. So, I think I stuck with them more so than the agency. The agency, obviously, you have a contract or your memorandums and things like that you have to use. But I was more concerned about what we were actually doing here. And I've always kind of been a maverick in that regard. When you look at certain things, I'm not looking at it, well, I'm not doing this because you get paid. I'm doing this because it's supporting individuals. It's helping people. It's finding directions. And if I can't do that, then why do it? And the neatest thing, I guess, about me, I didn't need the money. I was retired. And it just so happens that my wife is also retired military. So we planned our future, our focus, what we needed to do well before I started actually working out here. So it wasn't like I was working to work. I was doing it because I enjoyed the connection with the human being, if you will. And I think that's what kept me with Possibilities. It is a human focus. It is dealing with the people and their wants and their needs, and how they can go about doing that by connecting with one another.
So you were a part of one of the PIP programs, or was it Camp Possibilities then?
No, I was part of the PIP programs. Yeah, the first ones, the good ones. Yeah.
The good
Well, I
ones,
shouldn't say the good
OG.
ones. I think too, those things. The people that went to PIP or went to the retreats, I think the advantage is that they were connected for that whole time. Going out and back, that breaks that down. So you just getting started, you're really ready to get going, and all of a sudden, okay, let's break for a day and we'll come back tomorrow morning. The job that I worked at Eagle Ridge was technically the same thing, except we were working strictly with youth and with the schools. And we would use our funding and rent hotel rooms. We would do our retreats the same way. But as opposed to bringing them in for, say, a couple of hours, sending them home, bringing them back, we put them up in the hotel so that they could stay the entire time and have that connection. And I saw that same, success rate with Possibilities, having them at the retreat, having them together. We know that's costly, but is it? If you really think about it, sometimes we think, well, I don't have the money to do this. I say, well, you do have the money. It's just that how you spend the money and how you go about doing it. For instance, we would always ask, can I get a partner? Because again, we're looking for partners. Well, we've got hotels. They may have a block. They may have a certain time. And if you focus, if you ask, if you plan, you schedule, you put these things together ahead of time, you're really going to be spending less money, especially because of your outcomes. If those students are successful, if those adults are successful, if they can find a focus to do something to benefit that overall picture, well, you're actually making an investment instead of just spending money. So I just saw it that way.
So then, speaking of humans and connections and things, do you still talk with those people from your class still?
As a matter of fact, I do still see a couple of them.
Hey.
Now I can say, being elder, a lot of them, we've had a few people, and, even the Byron and some of the individuals here, they know that some of our older partners, associates, members have passed away. But, I go to a health center now that's only for elders. And I see people that I was with there. Some of them have gone on, but so you try to. And living here and staying here, I should say, has helped me stay in touch with some of those individuals. And that's also why I still come to the monthly, I still call them the networks, instead of the circles, because we can change names. But I think the real issue is you're connecting with people, you're having fellowship. I work with our veterans organizations, and the neatest thing about that is you've got a common focus. And the reason I do it is because I like seeing the individuals come back together and having an opportunity to talk about the things that they had a common connection with. Not to get there and say, hey, well, I had this rank and I shot this person or I stormed this beach. I don't think it's really about that as much as it's about you and I worked in the same place. We had the same focus. We had the same goals. We have the same beliefs about the country, our freedoms, what have you. And now with communities, it's the same thing, because regardless if the person is from the village or if they're from Midwest City or if they're from Bethany, they still want a secure community. They still want to have a safe neighborhood. They still want to have a good school system. They want to have good leadership. They want their tax dollars spent effectively. Every one of them, regardless of who they are. But if we don't talk together, we don't realize that we're all looking for those same goals. I play disc golf, and we just built a beautiful 18-hole disc golf in Midwest City. Yeah, I'm throwing a plug out there, but don't come out. I went out yesterday just to check to see how it's going to progress. It was jam packed, but the majority of the people are from everywhere but Midwest City. And when I would tell them, well, I'm on the park board and we planned this. Oh, this is awesome. This is great. But the thing is, they are there with themselves, with their friends, the people they brought in, and then they leave. But this is a place where you should be able to come and, hey, let me play around with this person today, this person the next time, this person the next time. And not in a tournament setting, but just in a human
Yeah, you came for a
relationship.
community dinner to have a talk with some people, maybe get somebody to help with the project. Then you
Yes.
can come back for a podcast workshop. Then you can come back for Inside Out. Then you can come back. You can do so
Exactly.
many options.
You've got so many options. You've got so many venues, but people have got to know that they're welcome. So when you ask them, you don't just say, okay, I'll see you the next time. No, I want you to tell me if there's something I can do, if there's something that you need, if there's someone in your neighborhood. That's what I really liked about when I see them doing things. I'll say, hey, there's this organization called, and the neatest thing, every third Monday. I shouldn't have to send something out. I said, every third Monday at 6:00, you can be assured that you can go to this. And I think that's the neatest thing. And don't worry about not having something to say, because we're going to be talking about you and everyone else. And if what you bring up, who knows, someone across the table from you may be looking for that same thing or something similar, or know someone that does that. And I think that's the objective, and that's the greatest part about possibilities. And the word itself, there's always possibilities, as Captain Kirk would say.
Live long and prosper.
So live long.
So I'm interested in this idea of, okay, so you had been doing community for a long time already before you started with possibilities. What was your idea of how to do community before possibilities, and how did possibilities change how you think about them?
Well, I think it's got a lot to do with how you're raised. I was raised in inner city Chicago, but at the time I was raised, you had community. The neighborhood that I lived in, everyone knew everyone. There was a pastor across the street. There was a teacher, and her mom was a school superintendent next door. There was a dentist on the other side of us. But the neatest thing was all of the families knew each other. We would sit on the porch. We would talk to each other. We would work with each other. Today, you've got your garage door open, drive in, close. That's it. You see a sign, read this before you ring the bell. Are you selling something? Did I ask you to come over? If not, just go away. See, that attitude is an issue that you want to get rid of more so, but we live that today. And we don't see what happens is when you live that way, you don't know that person. So whatever you hear from outside is what you believe, as opposed to taking the time to ask them. If you say, well, before I say your name and mess it up, say your name. Well, okay, let's do that. Well, how do you pronounce your name? It's okay to do that. Sure. You see, but we don't think that way. Well, let me see if I can do this. I was in recruiting service when I joined the Air Force. Well, I had to get to know people. I had to get to know their communities. I had to get to know their background so that I can match them to our needs. So that helped in numerous ways on community connection. I was in dentistry before I went into recruiting. But as a student, because I came in the Air Force at 18 years old, so a lot of the people that I hung out with were kids, families, dependents, in all of these great places. I took part-time jobs like at daycare centers and parks and things like that. So who am I working with? Community members. But I'm doing this all over the country. So I'm getting to see all different types of cultures, but doing the same things. I had a job with the Maryland National Parks part-time They gave me a step van.
Step
A
van.
step van, just one of those big vans. And inside it, they had these racks and it had roller skates. I had a portable record player and a box of vinyl records. This was in the 70s. Okay? This was in the 70s. But I would go to local schools in Washington, D.C., 2 nights, 3 nights a week. And I would rent the skates out to the kids or give the skates to the kids and play records and let them skate. Some nights I might have 5 kids. Some nights I might have 25 kids. You never knew from school to school. But I was just doing this because it was really neat to have fun with the kids. I was an avid camper, and we camped all over Western Maryland, West Virginia, that area. And one time we decided to take 5, 6 of these students that we hung out with at the skating. They had never left the inner city. They probably had never been outside their neighborhood. We got them together. We actually talked 2, 3 parents into going with us. We got the kids up there 3, 4 hours away from home. It was dark. We pitched the tents. These kids had never done anything like this. And we told them, when you get ready to go someplace, make sure you tell us, make sure you go with someone. If you get lost, you may never get found again. And I'm sure if I could run into some of these kids today, they remembered that. And I know they did. That was my goal, to get that type of reaction, that type of inspiration. So a lot of the things that I've done has been because of that. When I volunteered to do CPR training, first aid training, I trained our dental assistants for our Red Cross services. And I actually ran into a young lady some 10, 12 years later, and she remembered me, and she was a dentist now. And she said, when you did our training for Red Cross, that inspired me to continue in this profession. And we don't see those types of things when we're doing it. But that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be focusing on each other.
Yeah, so it sounds like your upbringing combined with a lot of kind of like worldly experiences contributed to who you were as a community member, community activist for Possibilities. So then what happened?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And as I got here, because every place I've gone, there's always these types of needs. Well, I just made sure I was involved in them. And when I left that place, it seems like you go someplace else, you're always looking for pretty much, well, you do the things that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So when
it's
you
just like
find
how
those
you do
things,
them that changes sometimes.
Yeah, well,
depending
and
on
I think
what
it is. It's the culture. It's the place you're at, the location that you're in,
who you're around.
Who you're around. Yeah, what's available. Because even with Eagle Ridge, I didn't ask to go to Eagle Ridge. Someone from what I was doing said, I know an organization that you would be
Eagle Ridge.
perfect at. And they sent me there. Well, obviously, Eagle Ridge connected with community. Possibility was part of that connection. So I think that's how that happened. But I guess the best part was that I had seen so many other things. So when I see something, I say, hey, here's an idea. Well, this was a place that did that. They would take your ideas and they would run with them and they would work with them. Because I feel today there's so many people that say, well, you need to do this and you need to take this and you need to go to this. I say, I don't think so. If you really look at what's around you, you probably already have those resources. Even though a person got that experience, they got that know-how, they got that ability a completely different way. But we have to use all of those resources and all of those actual ways to do things, as opposed to saying going to school. I sent a picture out of some of my craft work that I do. And one of the people on Facebook mentioned, well, I only had a C in art, so I couldn't do that. I say, well, I didn't do art. This is just something that I saw, I learned, I worked at, I struggled through, and I did it, And it just depends, we think I have to go to this school, or we allow people to make us believe you have to do it this way. You have to have this certification. And to
If
me,
you don't have a college degree, you're not successful.
you know, and some of the certifications to me, I think they take you farther and farther away from what you're really trying to do and the people you're trying to do it with. Because if you have this and they don't, how do you really work together? One of my heroes is, God, what's her name? She did the book Bridges Out of Poverty. You might have heard
I
of her.
feel like I've heard that name before.
Yeah, Ruby Payne. And it's about 2004, 2005. But she talks about the cultures. And, you know, you've got poverty, middle class, wealth, but those are actual living junctures. And she would ask the question, can you survive in these junctures? You know, and some people, well, sure, but you can see it. If I gave you $1 million, what would you do with it? 3 different people are going to do 3 different things. But depending on where they're from is what they're going to do. You know, poverty, you know, some people say, well, gee, anyone can. I say, I don't think so. You know, because you don't, if you're not used to talking to people, you wouldn't know to ask at all. You'd be afraid to ask. You see, middle class, well, I'm always trying to one up someone, you see. So, and then wealth, they pay to make sure you don't talk to me. You know, so there's so many things that we don't know that we don't know. And I think that's what's great about this possibilities, that you can come here.
Regardless of where you come from, how you got here, et cetera,
and we make sure we give you the opportunity, even through different techniques, different ways, to tell us your story and to show us that, oh, your story is kind of like that one, a little bit different, but guess what? If I take a little of this one and a little of this one and a little of this one, I can really make an awesome soup from that, you know, and that's really cool, you know.
Using that metaphor, what has been
Tasty
some of
soup.
what has been some of the soup that you've been able to make
Oh,
through
man,
possibilities?
Well, you know, even that, I guess, one of the neat things after going to PIP, you know, you had your internship, if you will, and you had to do your project. And I've always loved teaching. I've always loved working with the kids. And ours was to do a workshop, you know, with the students, teaching them public speaking, teaching them how to.
Was it from a particular school that you were teaching kids from, or?
Well, no, they were just from the community,
area?
from the
Okay,
community,
yeah.
because we had to recruit them to come to the workshop. So it was like we had our group where they did that. They had to do their own outreach. We had to build our own lesson plans. We had to bring the students together. They had to come for that weekend, and we had to teach that entire lesson. You see, but I've done that with all types of organizations, with the PTA, with community centers, the tobacco-free restaurants, parks. I actually threw the first pitch out at the ball field downtown when they went tobacco-free. You see, so there's a lot of different things that I've worked with through the community, and a lot of the stuff that we've done here, you know, falls right in line with that. You know, the picnics that they have, you know, all of the different. When we ask, instead of just coming to the meetings, let's go to the park and do the meeting. Let's have this. Let's do. You know, you got to be out of the box when you do things. So when you say soup, I think a lot of it is just a matter of being there when something comes up and saying, I want to help with this. And so a lot of the organizations that's out here, I think, you know, being able to work with them, you know, over the years.
So really, you've made like a lot of soup then over the years. Not just one kind of soup.
You've
made lots of soup.
All
different kinds of soup. You made minestrone one day, and then you made a chili the next day.
Bean soup, you know, good chili with peppers. So, yeah.
I started thinking about just the idea of community and sometimes how hard it is to get people involved, to get other people involved, and how to be that person that holds the space for that so that when they are ready or when they do want to jump in with you, that you're there ready to kind of take them to the kitchen and show them how to make the soup.
I think that is the key, but that's also the part that we have to understand, that we have to let them decide when they want to do it. When I'm showing them, I do lots of games. So I use games because they're safe. You know that you don't have to participate. And you can always walk away. But that also means that you can come in at any time. So when I'm playing with students, and you think about it, that fear of not knowing if I can do this. Well, you're basing it on what you perceive you have to do, and also on rules. When I talk about rules, life has rules, but they change. And they should change at any time, as long as you and the person you're dealing with agree on that change. Before
So then,
you move
our
forward.
norms,
That's
going
what
through
they
norms.
are.
Yes.
And see, we think of norms and we say, norms, well, what's really a norm? Based on where you're at, that may not be normal. You see, so you have to discuss
or what was
that.
normal, quote unquote, for right then might not be, quote
That's
unquote,
right.
normal for
You see,
later.
But we have to make sure that everyone's on board with that and they agree. When I was teaching and my instructors and, I would bring them in and say, okay, how do you feel about this? What's the issue with this? How are we doing this? And how would you do it different? I say, now, before you answer that, keep this in mind. When we get to the point of saying, this is what we agree on, guess what? That's what we will do. Now, if you want to change it, we can work at it again. But the thing is, once you say yes, this is how it goes until you change it. But see,
And
we
then you
don't
agree
do
to
that.
change it.
And we don't do that enough. So when I'm showing a new game to someone, I say, first thing we're going to do is figure out how to play it and agree that we're playing it that way. Now, any of you that's sitting on the side that's afraid to play, that's okay. Just hang out. Because you can't go anyplace else because we're all here, you see. But as we play and they see, oh, well, I didn't realize that I could do. Can I get in? Sure you can. That's the whole point.
If you're ready, come on.
And now they're ready. And, and I think that's the thing, even with communities, when we say we're doing something here, we're trying this today, we want you to be here. Okay. Remember what I said? Every third Monday. That means you may not come today, but you might want to go next week or the next month or the next month. And as long as we're doing it, you're always invited. But they have to know that they are always invited. We can't say, well, it took you so long. Nah, none of that.
No guilt tripping here.
We have to get rid of that part. And it's there. It is really there with everything we do.
Well, it's like it's all a lot, self-imposed guilt, I think. And then also just, society. A lot of our society makes you feel like, you either have to do it because you just have to, or they change the rules in the middle of all the things,
to do it this
which is
way.
so unfair. And it always I remember once when I was little, I got really mad at, I don't remember why or when or how. I think I was in elementary school, so I was little. And we were playing a game, and then they changed the rules, but nobody told me. And I just had a meltdown because I was like, no, we're supposed to be doing it like this. And then everybody started getting mad at me because I was kicking up such a huge fuss. But I was like, but I'm scared. I'm lost. why I feel abandoned. Why are you doing this to me? And it felt very personal, even though it totally wasn't, but it felt that way. And then it was like, well, I'm never playing with you guys again. And then I have like weird trust issues. And then I go on to like never speak to them again until like years and years and years later, or maybe never. Things like and all that. Those little things really compound and make connections difficult. And I think, a lot of the tools that we use at Possibilities are like norms are really important, even though it sounds kind of silly and it's like, oh, we have to go over our rules for the day. That's what are we, 12? And it's like, well, actually, I mean, it is nice to just say out loud, hey, if you want to go to the bathroom, you do not have to raise your hand. You can just go to the bathroom whenever you want. Are we all agreed that that's okay? Then yes. And then when somebody gets up to go to the bathroom, nobody's mad at that. Nobody thinks that that's weird. Or
parking lots, and I love parking lots, putting the signs up and writing the notes and sticking them on there for later because, or when someone goes out on the break and they're talking about something there that they didn't agree with, I say, bring it up. Don't be afraid to bring it up here. But if you don't want to say it, write it down, stick it on a sticky note, and then we can discuss it. I don't know who did it, but guess what? There's going to be more than one person that has that same thought process, that same feeling, or something similar to that. And then you can address it. So you all are being addressed. And I think that's the thing that makes us more comfortable, but letting them know up front, you can be comfortable. You can change this in midstream. But then doing it. You have your feedback cards and things like that. And you wait till the end of the session or the conference. Well, everybody's so ready to go and everything that they just go ahead and write down whatever and they send them in. At the recruiting school, I implemented a part where our feedback cards were in the classrooms from day one through graduation. So right after a class, not a whole session, a class period, if someone wanted to do a feedback right then, they could do it and stick it in that bag. What I was doing was not doing it on the instructors. I was doing it for the students because even our students weren't kids. Our students were career NCOs and officers. They have lots of input and lots of experiences. And guess what? We're there doing what someone told us, this is the requirement, this is the mandate. Well, maybe I can change that mandate based on something that this person did over in Europe that can help me in California. Wow, this is really cool, man, But you got to get the people up above you to think, well, is that safe? And I was that kind of person, I did a skating party in Fremont, California was one of my places where I recruited, which is Silicon Valley. But all of the kids that I recruited were rich kids. But they liked beaches, they liked skating, they liked softball, they liked all this cool stuff. But their parents had lots of money. Well, to get them to come into the military, I had to make sure they understood that that was their parents' money, not their money. So I would do things they liked. Well, I wanted to do a skating party, but I had to make sure everyone there was there for the Air Force and to hear the Air Force story. So I decided to rent the hall. Well, I can't rent the hall because they don't give me money. You don't give me money to rent the hall. But you did give me $6.50 to take a student to dinner or to lunch to talk about the Air Force. You did do that. As long as that person was somewhat physically qualified, in other words, by looking at them, they looked like they were in school, somewhat morally qualified. So that's what I had to find. I asked the skating people, how much would it cost to rent their hall? They said $300. I said, what would I get? They said, you can have 2 hot dogs, a bag of chips, and a soda for every student. I said, cool, that sounds good. I told my boss, he said, Hiawatha, I don't want to hear it. He said, however, you know how many people you have to meet that money. The contract did not say hall rental. It said food. I found 57 people the first one. Within the 3 years I was out there, I had about 5 of these. And it was great. And each kid, I would tell them, if you want to bring someone and you've already been, you cannot come unless you bring someone else. And if you can only go twice, without being in the delayed entry. So in other words, without going into the Air Force. Oh, by the way, I was one of the top recruiters in the country. So, but my boss knew this. You knew what you were supposed to do. You knew what your goal was, and you knew what your parameters were. But we have to teach people that they could be trusted to do that. And then they have to have the ethics to do it that way. And that's the same thing here. When we're dealing with people, if I tell you we're going to do something, we're going to do our best to work to get to that objective and nothing else or more. You know, when they say, well, I want to be the best, there's no such thing as the best. You can always make something better if you find the right people, you know.
My favorite thing is about trust, when Byron's like, if our meeting says it goes from 1 to 2, we're ending right at 2. And we're not going beyond that. That's one of my favorite things, because it's like he says, nobody pays attention after it hits 2 o'clock. Yeah. They're already checked out. So there's no point in keeping them that long. Yeah. So it's like, again, if you say you're going to do the thing, do the thing.
Oh, sure. And that's the whole thing of the objectives. If you say these are your objectives, and even with that, you know, everything can go awry. Everything, you know. Caca happens, I think they call it. Right? But you know why that's happening, and then you make that adjustment to that. But you can't do that all the time, you know. So, and I've always been one that I didn't like meetings unless I had to have them, you know. And when we had them, we knew what they were for, you see. And then you'd get in, get out, things like that. Yeah.
Forward momentum.
Something that I was thinking about earlier whenever you were talking about your upbringing is that in a community where everyone knows each other and like every family knows each other and all that sort of thing, it's a very different thing whenever you're sort of immersed in community. And in some ways, I'm sure you probably felt this as a teenager, forced into community, right? Whenever it's like, go say hi to your grandma.
Said I had
to. But at the same time, now we are so isolated, and it's becoming easier and easier to be isolated, but it's becoming way harder to get back into community. And so now kids are being raised where they're not forced into community. They don't have to be a part of community. And now it's even harder to find it and establish it and be a part of something because there wasn't something already there to kind of grow up with. And so in a way, I want to ask you, because you've been involved in community and building communities, what is a good way to establish community where there hasn't been one, differently from where there's already a community, and enhancing that, right?
Well, think about that when you say that. Define community. 1959, I started school. Okay. A child has no real control over the environment they're in at all. Yeah. That's a given. But they're in a community, regardless of what it's like. Even today, we hand our kids electronics. They program in their names so they can say their name. Good job, Johnny, you know, and they show them the pictures. That's their community. Sure. That's what they know. We had a person saying your name. So it was the same thing. But it was how that worked. My parents would say, get out of the house, go across the street, go see so-and-so, you know, and that was that. You made your friends. Today, you have play dates. You have someone pick and choose who you play with. Well, how did they decide on who that person was? There was something else, a media stream or something that defined, this is a good child. You remember the word stranger? You may not. I don't know how old you are, but stranger danger is totally different today. You know, we put it on the 6 o'clock news, but we don't use the word stranger danger. You see, we say, well, they've got a phone and I can do a GPS. Well, that GPS is just telling you where you're getting beat up. You see, it's not keeping you from getting beat up.
Right.
You see, so we have to make people see the importance of that. If I was saying, if I'm building a game and it's all hands on, but then they've got an electronic game that does everything for you, you have two different games, but I'm not using that amygdala the same way. So I'm not letting them get that experience the same way. But they are going to have to choose whichever one I hand them, aren't they? The child is. So when you say, how do I build that community? I think it's got a lot to do with how much are you willing to step in and do to make one of them either more, say, inspirational to the child, because the child is going to act the same way. You know, if I was to say, I've got a student at a school and he's sitting on this desk and he should be sitting in a chair, I've got two choices. I could either just walk past him or I can say something. Well, if I just say, gee, nice chair, I didn't say anything offensive to him, but I recognized that person. I gave them value. If I know their name and say, hey, Ralph, nice chair. You see what I'm doing? Or I can just walk past. They're going to still sit there. Now, are they really supposed to be sitting there? Not necessarily, but depending on where they're from, that may be okay. And I can't say it's not okay because I don't know where they're from unless I do. You see, so again, when you say building that community, I got to know what that community is about up front. Parent teachers. You've got a child go to school, and I might have a parent that believes, I need my kids to go to school because I need the time to get to work. Well, school's not daycare. You see, so, but it is to them. So how do I make that change? You see, so all of these things I have to bring together in that community. Can I find a way to make school more can I find a way to make the parent more valuable to the school, to the child? Can I make the child realize, hey, you're not just going here to read the book. You're going here to find a friend without me, to find out that this person is really like this and not like what they said on the 7 o'clock news last night. You see, because if I find one person and they look, you know, like me, and you see a person that stabs someone, every one of us don't stab someone. Or if you find a person that, say, looks like you, and they stab someone, everyone that looks like you don't stab someone, you see. But we have to see that whole picture. You know, I went to all boys high schools in Chicago, and they were all inner city, and they were Catholic, and they were college prep. And the funniest part is I didn't pick that school, nor did I decide to do that, but that's what I got. You see, so in other words, that's what I meant by I didn't have the control, but guess what? I benefited.
Sure.
You see, so if you are in a community where you don't have that resource, that's not your fault. You see, but we make it seem that way. Well, these schools are not. It's that you made this one this way, and you made this one this way, but you should have made them all the same way. How do I do that? Whoa, I got to bring everybody together to do it. But I got to have people brave enough.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying to build community, there has to be opportunity and
trust.
And
Again,
trust.
And trust.
And then kind of like the, I don't know what word I'm trying to think of, but like enmeshment of people with other people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, people
And
need to
getting-
understand each other.
Yeah, and being able to have those experiences.
Oh, yeah. Because if you don't, let's see. I went to a school outside of my neighborhood. I took public transportation to school. I guess Oklahoma City is starting to give out little bus tokens for the kids to go to school. Chicago always did that. And we went to school on city transportation. But I would go through my neighborhood, a Polish neighborhood, a Spanish neighborhood, a Lithuanian neighborhood, just to get to school at 15 through 17 years old. Think about the cultures I was learning.
You meet some very interesting people on public transit. You hear some very interesting conversations.
And you can talk to them.
Yes.
Because you see them every day. You see, but we get in our parents' car, they drive us, and I used to call it the speedway. They drop them off, take them to school, take them back home. They don't get to see any of that. And at school, the ones they get to see are the ones that's in their classrooms until someone said, well, I don't really want you to play with them. I don't want you to do this. You see, or we see certain things and they, at that age, aren't really capable of making that decision on why. So they're going to have to take whatever you give them. It's kind of like alcohol. We say you're not supposed to drink until you're X age. I think the age is arbitrary because you got other countries that do that and they're probably not the same as us. However, if you're going to do that, you got to do it in a way that makes it work. My parents, it was really funny. We had an upstairs and a downstairs in my house, but we had this door that led into the main part of the house out of the hallway, the foyer to go into the house. If my parents were having a party or people over or guests or something, we were upstairs. That door was closed. We didn't know what was going on. We kind of knew what they were doing, but we didn't know. But we did know this. It wasn't for us. That was the message. There's nothing wrong with that for that age because that's teaching you something. And once you get older, you make a decision because you knew it was there, but you could make a decision. You see, and they were showing you make these decisions. Today, we've got everything on TV. And it shows that all is good. I would do things when I was working with substance abuse. You see a sign that says, must be 21 to buy this or 18 to buy this, but the sign is this big. But then you see a sign this big that says beer, 12-pack, $9. A child sees that big means important. Big means good. Small, not so much. What if we were to flip that?
Making more conscious human decisions.
Because the adult, they already know what they're getting, but the child that sees it, they don't. And that's why you're flipping it. But you know who would go crazy? The industry would go crazy. You see, and I think that's the thing. So when we say focus, getting them to do that, getting them to say, well, I really do, because they're going to get the people they need eventually. They're just not going to get as much, and it's really neat. You talk about these connections. I was in dentistry my first 10 years in the Air Force, and we had a shortage of dentists right after the war, Vietnam War. So they sent a lot of us back to school to learn to do all procedures. So it was like a PA. And it was really funny to see some of the stuff that we did and focus on, but the politics of it. You saw all of that too. So that tied together with a lot of this with the communities too. So I would be working and I would say, well, gee, if I go to this school or if I go to this school, or if I go to this school, it's all the same. But we make it seem like, well, this is better than that one. And this is, let's say, not really, they're all doing the same things. So how do I make people see that? Well, if you're competing, you're not going to do it. They're going to fight to say, I'm better than this or I'm better than that. And in essence, we have to say we're all doing it for the same reason, So, and it's a challenge, but it's also, I think it's
a worthy battle.
It's there you go. It's the purpose thing. We say, well, I'm doing this for a purpose or the fight or whatever. But you are, and I think that's what makes it cool. And I don't know. I have my frustrations too, because when I'm out here and here I am in Oklahoma and I want to show a person something, or I say, I've had an experience of doing this in this place and in that place, Japan and there and there and there. And you've been right here in Oklahoma, but you don't want to try to do it different. It used to drive me insane when we get our report cards and they would say, well, tobacco status right now for youth tobacco use, we've got a D, or we got a C for the report. And someone in the room would say, well, gee, I wonder who got the Fs. And I'm sitting there looking at them and I say, how about this? I wonder who got the A. Who cares about who got the F? Because guess what? It doesn't matter. It don't really matter. But now we're getting a lot of Fs because we're looking that way instead of looking the other way, And I always say we're all as capable. It's just that you don't know what you don't know yet, and you have to get to know it. And I'd go to a workshop or a conference or anything. I never sat with my associates, office mates, etc. They'd always wonder why. I say, I already know what you think. I already know what you're doing. I already know how you feel about this. But I don't know how they feel in Clinton. I don't know how they feel in Pittsburgh. And they're all doing the same things. Why do they do it different? What's in Guyman that keeps it different? But see, I had an advantage working in medical recruiting for all of Oklahoma and all of Kansas and all of Missouri and North Texas. Guess what? I got to see all of these places even before I started working with these organizations here. So I already knew what was up there and what was here. But when I offered to say, hey, you should check these guys out, or you should check this out. Well, we don't have the time, we got to, I say, yeah, you do. You don't know how much time you have. You can get hit by a bus tomorrow. So it is. It's just a wonderful life that you can use if you just use it,
Well, with that, I'm being mindful of our time. So Hiawatha, thank you so much for being a part of the Possibilities community, for being a part of now the Breaking Ice Building Bridges community. You've already actually been a part of the podcast community. You were on the porch as well. And so we're very glad to have you in our circle.
Oh, and I'm honored to be here. And as Peaches knows, that Possibilities has been in my heart for many, many years. And hopefully it'll be here. And as long as it's here, I'll be here.
Woohoo! Well, great. And thank you, listener, for listening to Breaking Ice Building Bridges.
Connecting a community through conversation.
Breaking Ice Building Bridges is the Possibilities community podcast platform. Thanks for tuning in.